はい、ということで、北欧2国から学ぶダイバーシティを取り込み新たなアイディアを創発する方法ということで、今からセッションを開始させていただきます。よろしくお願いいたします。
お願いします。
And from now on, it's going to be in English. And we'd like to welcome today Mr. Ragnar from Iceland Embassy and Niina from Finland Embassy. And thank you all for joining today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as this Finland and Iceland is have our gender equality gap, they're in the top rank in the world. So we would like to understand a little bit of how Japan could follow or be not similar, but to learn from Iceland and Finland today. And firstly, I would love to ask for Ms. Niina to explain a little bit about Finland, and then after that, a little bit about Iceland, so that we can all understand what the scenery right now is and things. So, Niina, would you explain a little bit of it?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for coming here this morning. And I will start with a very short explanation about what Finland is like.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay. So can we change the document to the 資料スライドお願いしてもいいですか?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So I will be very brief, but maybe here some people know a little bit about what Finland is like, but I would explain maybe a little bit further some details about Finland, especially from the perspective of equality and diversity. But you can see here Finland on the world map. And just to go over some very basic facts, we are not a very large country, 5.5 million people. We are about the same size as Hokkaido, and also in terms of climate and nature, we are quite similar to Hokkaido. So I think a lot of Finnish people feel a bit of a connection with Hokkaido region. And we are a very sparsely populated country, so there aren't very many Finnish people in the world. We have 2 official languages and a national minority called the Sami people who live in the north with their own distinctive language as well. We've been independent since 1917. Before we were actually part of Russian Empire, and before that a part of Sweden. So we've been in the middle of large countries for a long time, and we of course collaborate internationally very strongly. As a small country, we have to be very open-minded and seek partners for abroad. So we've been member of United Nations, European Union, and also most recently we joined NATO this spring. And some basic facts about Finnish maybe equality. So we're at the top at the global gender gap index, but we will hear from Ragnar very soon that actually Iceland is even more advanced in that sense. And Finland was the first country in the world to grant full election rights to women in 1906, which means you could vote in the election, but also be as a candidate. And actually already in the first election, after this decision, 1907, 19 female MPs was elected. So it was quite a big share of the parliament already, at the first round. And right now, Finland, the gender balance in Finnish parliament is about 50-50, so 46% of MPs are female in the current parliament, and 12 out of 19 of current ministers, who you can see in the photo, this is the Finnish government, are female. And average age of the parliament is 47, so it's actually easy, or relatively easy, as a Finnish person to become a member of parliament, also at the young age. So we really value the participation of young people in politics, and I think it's a very essential part of diversity also. And some other aspects, of course, we have allowed same-sex marriage has been legal since 2017. So couples of same-sex can get married. They could be in an official partnership before that, but now they are fully at the same sort of equal with the heterosexual couples. And in terms of, for example, economic equality, education in Finland is free. It's free for everyone. And we have been providing, for example, free school meals to all the students since 1940s. So it's a really big part of equality, also creating equal opportunities for everyone despite your economic background. We've been the happiest country in the world for 6th year, or are the happiest country in the world for 6th year in a row. And also because I know that a lot of Japanese people are very aware of SDGs. So we've been, for the 3rd year now, we have been ranked as #1 in SDGs, meaning that we are the most advanced country in putting them into action or implementing SDGs. And I guess many of you maybe know some of these things, so they are very well-known Finnish things here, also here in Japan. So sauna, Moomin, of course, and then the beautiful winter landscape with the aurora or northern lights, and then Marimekko is, of course, very well known here in Japan as well. So that's a little bit about Finland, and I will pass the baton to Ragnar from Iceland. So please go ahead.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. 皆さんおはようございます。アイスランド大使館のラグナルと申します。今日来てくれてありがとうございます。I'm going to do my presentation in English, obviously. I would like to start by telling you the Icelandic word for diversity. That's fjölbreytileiki. You can see on the picture up on the screen. This is from just 2 weeks ago when we had the 5th women's strike. So Icelandic women have been going on strike for 5 times already since 1975 to protest the inequalities between men and women. So I would say that shapes a lot our approach to equality and diversity. Also, just as Niina did, I want to tell you a bit about Iceland. I'm sure that not all of you are fully aware of these kind of basic things about Iceland. The official language is Icelandic. It's a Nordic Germanic language. We have a population of 400,000 people. So it's about the same as maybe Shibuyaku and Shinagawa combined together. The total area is 100,000 square kilometers, so making the comparison with Hokkaido again. Hokkaido is about 80% of Iceland. We became an independent country in 1918, previously under Danish rule, so we were a part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Then we entered into a union with Denmark and became a republic in 1944. And our parliament, Alþingi, is the oldest parliament in the world, founded in 930, so 1,000 years ago. Just as Finland, we are a member of the UN. We were a founding member of NATO, and we joined the European Economic Area in '92. So it's we're not a full member of the European Union. And an interesting fact is that the former president of Iceland, Ms. Vigdís Finnbogadóttir, was the first democratically elected woman head of state. That was in 1980. So I grew up with having a woman as a president. And then, looking at some of these indexes, Iceland ranks as the most gender equal country in the world, according to the Global Gender Gap Index by the World Economic Forum. This doesn't mean that we have reached complete gender parity. There's also a lot of work that we need to do in Iceland. I also wanted to mention that for the 15th year, we are the most peaceful country in the world. So I'm trying to draw parallels between, being equal and allowing for diversity maybe creates peace. Similar to Finland, we have a very high level of women in both parliament and in the government. So about 50% in both cases. Same-sex marriage has been legalized for 13 years already. And then a few years ago, Iceland implemented a very progressive act on gender autonomy. So basically, it gives people the right to gender-neutral registration and several other things. I wanted to maybe mention a bit before we move forward a few points how we focus on diversity. I believe diversity helps to broaden the perspective of decision making, both for businesses and government. It leads to better productivity, and it encourages competitiveness, increases competitiveness. A couple of examples from Iceland: the business associations like the Chamber of Commerce and the Federation of Employers, they've implemented campaigns and even working groups on diversity, where they are working with companies trying to tackle diversity-related issues. And then, of course, the government implements a lot of policies and has a legal framework, especially around gender equality. And as an example, companies and institutions with 25 or more employees, they need to create their own gender equality plan on how they plan on making sure that there are equal opportunities for people both to progress within the company and so on. My last slide is about, what is diversity for us in the Nordics, and I just wanted to leave it maybe up here on the screen. It can relate, so for us in the Nordics, it can relate to gender, men, women, gender neutral or non-binary people, sexual orientation, if you're gay, lesbian, bisexual. It's about gender identity, including trans people. It's also focused on educational level, factors like race, ethnicity, and nationality, socio-economic background, ability, age and experience, location or geographical background, like where you live within the country, marital status, do you have children, and then there's intersectionality, when people have different things that make them diverse. So, I wanted to leave it up there on the screen for our discussions, and that's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This is really important for us, I think, because to Japanese people, well, for Japanese like me, hearing diversity, I think about of course gender, of course about all these sexual orientation and things. But one thing that I was really interested in hearing was of course diversity, you need age diversity as well and things like that. And you're saying all these are diversity, right? Did both of the countries say which was the first issue, or was it looking into all of it at the same time, or is it how did you overcome diversity, or is there anything way that you did that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess from the Icelandic perspective, I would say that we started focusing on gender equality. We are a very homogeneous country. We're an island with a small population. So traditionally, the population has been very homogeneous, of the same origin. So for us,
quite Japanese, quite like Japan.
Maybe a bit similar to Japan in that way. So in the 70s, the focus was on gender equality. Then we move into the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, and that's when the LGBTI rights movement started growing, and the movement of the LGBTI organization in Iceland was kind of supported by the women's movement. So I would say that me as an openly gay man, I have a lot to thank to the women's movement, that they did a lot of work in the 70s and 80s. And then I guess, the aspect that we are looking at now is the population is becoming more international. So we have people from other European countries, from countries all over the world, and 18% of the Icelandic population is born outside of Iceland or foreign nationals. So I guess that's the diversity issue that we are working on now.
Is it quite same with Finland, or?
I would say there's a lot similar in Finland. So we paid attention to the gender equality of women's position in the society for a very long time, and it was a result of a very practical reason because of the wars we had in Finland. So because all the men had to go to war, then all the women had to take care of the society back home because they weren't meant to do the farming work or anything. So they had to take up very practical work, and I think that was kind of, I suppose, the basis for this mental sort of situation where people sort of accepted that women participate in workforce and contribute into, labor workforce. So it was created out of this, I guess, a necessity. So we've been highlighting the issue of gender equality for a very long time, but of course it's a result of a very long process, so it didn't happen overnight. But one other thing that we have really paid attention to in Finland is the socio-economic background, which I think is also important part of diversity, because Finland used to be very, very poor. We used to be one of the poorest countries in Europe. We were dependent on UN aid after the wars, and the result, or the reason that why Finland is one of the most affluent countries in the world in many ways is because we made a decision to create all equal opportunities for everyone, and that meant, for example, free education for all, sort of both for boys and girls had to go to school, and then we created the social economic welfare state that supported everyone, that they could have equal opportunities in society. So we've paid attention to, for example, educational level and socioeconomic background for a very long time. So I guess that is also one key aspect of Finnish diversity as well.
Iceland is also free of charge, like education?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
It's
more or less like a Nordic model.
Or the Nordic,
I guess.
Probably.
And then there's like a variety of ways to implement it. Like in Finland, there are free school meals and so on. And but I think it's also interesting because you mentioned about Finland being one of the poorest countries in Europe. Iceland was as well. And if you look at the statistics now, we are among the top 15 countries in the world when it comes to GDP per capita. So we've been able to kind of work on our economy and kind of implement equality at the same time, or gender equality, that is. So maybe my argument is that,
so just one question I would like to ask is this like the gender or diversity coming from also the corporate, the company and government? And because I think Japan currently trying to, push like gender equality or diversity, but because I was working Nokia, and I actually experienced really the balanced organization. There are quite female top management and male management. So that is something I really felt like, I am comfortable to working in this environment.
I think it is also a very essential part of the sort of private sector and corporate world in Finland and also in the Nordic countries. So of course there is a lot of, for example, legislation that prevents, or supports equality in a way. A lot of private companies have sort of regulations that allow, very flexible working style, so people in many kinds of life situations can participate in work life. So that I think is one very important part. Then, of course, like I said, there's a legislation that creates, for example, parental leave and so on. So everyone can, even if they have children, they are able to, work very, very flexibly. And I think a lot of companies nowadays, at least in the Nordic countries, have really understood what a very important part for the profit of the company diversity can be. So when you have a lot of different kinds of people working together, there's a lot more new ideas, there's a lot more new sort of viewpoints and aspects into the work that they do. So having diverse people discuss ideas together can create also just economic profit for the company. So I think that can be a very important part for also, for the company's success to have diverse work stuff. But
I think also it's important to keep in mind that sometimes in order to implement these changes, the legal framework needs to support that. And I know the debate here in Japan about board of directors of companies and bringing women on board. Like we had this big discussion maybe 13 years ago after the financial crisis hit us, that most of the boards were filled with men around the same age and so on. So the government decided to implement a law saying that companies of certain size, with an X number of employees or more, or listed companies and so on, that they needed to make sure that they had the 40-60 ratio. So at least 40% of the board was either men or women, and 60% was the other. And that was very controversial in the beginning. But of course, if people don't have opportunities to take on a role, then you don't have role models, and then nothing changes. So sometimes the government needs to step in. And now, I mean, even today, the situation hasn't really come to a 50-50 ratio on the boards, but at least it's moving in the right direction.
Did you have any difficulties? Because, I think if a government does that in Japan right now, we may have difficulties and some challenges. What kind of challenges did you have, or how did you overcome that?
So at the time where this law was implemented in Iceland, I was working at the Chamber of Commerce, so I could hear from some of the companies that they were completely against it. But what happened, the positive aspect, was that the Association of Women in Business, they stepped forward and they said, okay, we have a list of hundreds of women who are educated, experienced, and capable to take on this role. So please use this list the next time you're recruiting on your board. So even though the first steps were a bit difficult, there was a very positive outcome out of it, I would say.
Yeah, but I think, at least from my perspective, we have to be honest that even though in Finland the managerial positions in general, I think both in public and private sector, something like 38% is held by women. If you just think about managerial positions in general, we're still not there, and there's a lot of work still to be done to achieve the situation, for example, where we can see more top women CEOs. So there are those, but there's still definitely a lot room for more. But I think it's clear that we are moving into that direction. So, but still work to be done.
Challenging. And
yes, yeah, and I think it's really important to see people in these kind of positions in media and sort of see that since other women have made it, I can also make it. So role models in that sense are very, very important.
Yeah, I do think so. And seeing women like that, from a woman's perspective, it's really important that you have a role model. And I would love to understand about the men's perspective, because I think looking at diversity of gender issues, if we don't have a help of men to push women up. It's very difficult. But you were saying that the first time when you were in Little, the people in the top were like women, right? And the government or something. How was that like?
Yeah, so I mean, I can reflect a bit on my experience. Like when I grew up, I mentioned earlier that we had the first woman head of state who was democratically elected in the world. So the president from 1980 to 1996. So I come from a generation of men who grew up with a woman as our president. And her name is Vigdís Finnbogadóttir. She's a big friend of Japan, actually, has been here several times. And she often tells this story that a little boy was watching TV and he saw the US president on TV. It was Ronald Reagan. And he looks at his mother and says, "Mom, can men also be presidents?" Because he didn't know anything else. Like, he just knew that women were presidents. And I think Finland had, a woman president as well.
Yes, we had the same situation. So a generation of people grew up with only a woman as a president. So it became a very normal thing. People got used to it, and now it's not so, unusual anymore.
So, I mean, in Japan, it's very good to see, like now with the new foreign minister, Ms. Kamikawa, I think there are emerging, people that will be role models for the current and future generations, but it takes time.
Thank you. And you were mentioning that like diversity for a company issue or business is really good because you have all these like diverse ideas and things. And I do know that like Finland and Iceland have lots of like startups or incoming new ideas and things. How do you think does diversity like connect to those kind of like emerging companies or things, or all these ideas, or in business? How do you see?
Well, I think it definitely connects to the idea of diversity. Well, in Finland we have created a fairly robust startup ecosystem supported by the public sector. So a lot of people who want to become startup entrepreneurs have good opportunities to do so. There's a system where you can, set up your own company and try your ideas, and that is available for everyone. So people from all kinds of backgrounds, of course, can try their skills as entrepreneur.
Yeah. And I was like really looking and hearing from Finland that like it's not only like people in university or like young age people, but like people who's like had their careers already and setting up to be a startup from a certain age or something. So it's all diversity, right? In the age diversity.
Definitely, it's very. I guess one aspect of age diversity is also that you have opportunities to change your career in different times of your life. So even later in life, you can change your career or go to university to study a new degree because it's free. Or you can set up your own company and try that. So there's a lot of opportunities for different people from different stages in their life. So I think that's also one aspect that we can think of as diversity.
Maybe I can add to that. I think it's also important, like especially like in the startup system. I mean, the startup system in Finland is very strong, and in Iceland we can learn a lot from you guys. I think when it comes to like tech products and now what we're going to be seeing in the future, like with artificial intelligence and so on, if you have a very homogeneous group of people designing the products that we are using, if it's only like men living in the East Coast or the West Coast of the US, that is, then the products that they will develop are going to be made from their perspective. But if you bring on board different views, like cultural views, like Japanese views, or a woman's view, a view from an LGBTI person, not only just bringing on in the views, but also making sure that the teams that are developing these things are diverse. That's how you make sure that these kind of products are accessible to everyone. And I'm not saying that that's being done necessarily in Iceland, but it's more like a thought about how important it is for the future to embrace diversity.
So if you really want to launch like startup, but you also need to learn, or maybe you need to learn our educations again. So I understand like, education system free of charge also made, but how about, more like older people or, people are not like kids or things? Are they also having the equal opportunities?
Well, everyone, of course, we have this concept that we like to highlight in Finland called lifelong education, where you can learn new things throughout your entire life, and it's not just for your career or making more money, but also for yourself, the joy of learning. But definitely, we try to create, of course, opportunities for older people, of course, also to have different, opportunities in life. But when I have to be, again, honest about the Finnish perspective, so it is not as easy as when you get older to change careers when you are a younger person. So I think that is something we are trying to get there, and there's a lot of people at older stages in their life when they still want to experience something new and change careers, but it's not so easy for everyone. So that's something that we have to pay attention to, so that also those kind of people can, contribute to the economy later in life.
It's also interesting, making the comparison between universities in Japan and in the Nordic countries, that if you walk into a class in the Nordics of people studying at one of the universities, there tends to be a bit more age diversity. So, like when I was studying, I did my undergraduate degree in Copenhagen. We had people from all age levels, from like 19 years old up to like 60 years old. So in some cases, it's people that have not been to university before, who are taking the opportunity at a later stage in life to do it. But in other cases, it's maybe people who are changing their path in life, like redeveloping and so on.
Yeah, I think like as Japan's is going to be an aging population and things, I think reskilling and is going to be really important issue as well. So like learning from the Nordics, like to learn other things, like I think that's really important issue in Japan as well. But like to go back into university, you say like university-wise, is that free of charge or what kind of like things?
Yeah. If you are a Finnish person, the university education is free all the way to the PhD level. So anyone can apply for university through entrance exams and get a new degree. And I have a lot of examples from my friends who are in their 30s with families, and they've just decided to change careers. So they studied a new degree and then started working in some completely other field. For example, programming nowadays, ICT sector is really, it makes good money and a lot of people are interested in it. So it's a very affluent field in Finland. So a lot of people have taken up careers in the ICT sector. And that's become possible because you can study for free also as an adult.
So like the government, when do you think that the government like try to make that education all free for everyone, or did it take time? Or
well, it was already decided way back. After when Finnish independence. So that was sort of the basic ideology or like philosophy in the Finnish society, that everyone had to go to school. And everyone had to, so it had to be free. That was we had to educate our population to create economic growth. So it was just a rule. Everyone had to study, so that was the basis for it.
And everyone had to study, and right now, people who wants to study can go back in free and do the education. So that's why they can learn a little bit of different things or things that they haven't been doing, and then start their own another path. So that's really important to do, like all these like innovation things as well. Is Iceland quite same like that, or is it different?
Yeah, I mean the roots from our system, like I mentioned earlier, we were a part of the Kingdom of Denmark, so most of our like systems and educational traditions are based on their model. So it's kind of like the Nordics are always learning from each other. So that's one of the things I also want to mention, that when we are you know, telling about our experience, it's also we've been through learning from each other, I think. But yeah, Iceland, to answer your question, Iceland similarly allows people to kind of redevelop and seek new education. It can also be done through the unions. So like if you're in a job, then most people have access to funds within their union, where they can get money to go to, you know, take language courses or programming courses or whatever you're interested in.
I think that might be one of the reason for happiest ranking, like in being in top. But I would really definitely want to ask you one question. I just got all these, but this one, like, how do you see Japan as in diversity right now? And then any ideas to accelerate these diversity in Japan further? Any information and advice or anything here?
I think this is the most difficult question because, you know, I have a lot of respect for Japan as our host country here, but, you know, to be honest, if we look at management and we look at politicians and so on, I think we can agree that there's room for more women to be included there. So I think there's a lot of good work going on related to gender equality, but I also wanted to mention the diversity aspect related to LGBTI people, that, you know, it's important both for businesses and politicians to make sure and try to implement work that is inclusive to the LGBTI community. And I mean, I think this is not only about human rights, it's also an economic issue, because I had the book with me and it's about the economic case of including LGBTI people in society, and it argues that you lose 1% of your GDP, a country's GDP. That's a lot of money. So my argument is that by embracing diversity and being more inclusive, you can also earn money.
Oh, okay. That would be one of the good things for Japan.
Yeah, definitely. So I think as far as I've understood, there's a lot of very impressive initiatives here, for example, in Shibuya, in terms of these diversity issues like LGBTI issues. So it's very nice to see. I think there's a lot of sort of grassroots movement here in Japan that has really impressed me, and a lot of people are very conscious about these things. So I think there's definitely a lot of positive movement in Japan on maybe like among the general populace in Japan, and I hope that to see that sort of be reflected also in the top levels of society. So I think ultimately the change needs to come from above, so there needs to be policy decisions to implement these issues so that diversity can fully be sort of implemented in society. So yes, definitely room for maybe more high-level women in Japan, as Ragnar mentioned.
And maybe I can add also a point of encouragement. I think it's good to reflect on other people's experience. And in my conversations and from what I've read about the women's movement in Iceland, they've all said that the most important thing was to take up space. Of course, the men are going to be like, you don't have a role here, like, what are you doing here, and so on. I mean, they are obviously wrong. And I was at a university lecture the other day, and I can repeat what I said to the young students there, that you know, they need to have their voice heard and take up space and try to, I mean, yes, the policy change needs to happen, but then you know, people also need to push forward themselves.
Yes.
So
we need to do the bottom up as well,
yes.
not only the top down, but like
and cultural change, of course, or the cultural mindset, I think is really important. So it cannot only be policy; it needs to be a mentality in the society, and for that you also need the role models. So you need to see examples of diversity, then it becomes the norm, and then you don't think about it so much anymore. So, for example, Finland, we had a fairly visible previous prime minister, Sanna Marin, and she did a good job, and I don't think anyone really will be surprised when Finland has another prime minister who is a woman. So it just became like a normal,
quite young, right?
Yes, like quite a normal thing in society. So you need these sort of practical examples. Then people can realize that, hey, this can be normal, and then you don't have to think about it as some kind of unusual situation anymore.
But I would also be interested in hearing, like, later on, you know, from the audience and from the two of you also, what you think Japan needs and what, you know, Japan can learn from others, and of course teach others as well. But I guess we're not gonna be.
Yeah, we're running a little bit of time. We would love to hear more, but we're running out of time right now. So thank you very much for you for sharing about how Japan should or be like that to accelerate further. We'll be having some few minutes afterwards, we can have exchange of name cards outside. So, but thank you today for joining us. We're already running out of time, so we would like to finish this panel discussion. And thank you for the audience of listening today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
ご登壇いただいた皆様ありがとうございました。Thank you very much for sharing your idea and thoughts. Thank you so much. どうぞ皆様ご講談ください。ありがとうございました。